all you literary legends and luminaries. I'm Julie and welcome to another episode of Booksmart. Today's book is The Woman Beyond the Attic, the V.C. Andrews story by Andrew Neiderman. As a V.C. Andrews fan, I couldn't resist this book. There isn't much information out there about V.C. Andrews, and she died so shortly after publishing Flowers in the Attic, and I'm always interested in the life of writers and all the behind the scenes of how they write and what inspired them to write. I thought this book would be an excellent source of information. This was probably the worst book and most poorly written book I've ever read. I know that sounds harsh, but I almost didn't buy the book. In fact, when the book was still on the shelf after my third time at the bookstore, I finally decided to buy it. It's the subtitle that worried me. The V.C. Andrews story. Is this a cheesy Lifetime movie? It's written like a horrible, watered-down, unorganized mess of a research paper that provides little information in a messy way. Before I go any further, let me just read you a part of the introduction, which the introduction is a preview of the whole book, not just an introduction. It's like a poorly written college essay for a professor who insists on the archaic introduction that gives you all the main ideas that are to come in the paper. By the way, the introduction is 18 pages long. The biography part of the book is only 148 pages long. All right, prepare yourself. So then, if she was so successful at it, why did she give up art and turn all her energy to writing? And when she began to dedicate herself to writing, she was not an immediate success. By her own admission, she had written 9 novels before she wrote Flowers in the Attic, none of them attracting an agent, much less a publisher. Why didn't she give up writing novels and stories and return to art, through which she had proven income? Could it have been something to do with a self-proclaimed ability to see the future, a future she saw filled with success and her belief in reincarnation? Would it surprise you to know that Virginia was convinced she was gifted with ESP and thought this gift prepared her to confront the challenges presented by chronic pain and limited mobility? Did psychic experiences strengthen her faith in her eventual writing success? From her letters included here, it is almost eerie to see how confident and determined she was. What does triumph look like for a successful author as opposed to, say, a business entrepreneur? Authors, all authors, find success with their work when they create an intimate connection with their readers. These authors succeed in going beneath the surface of romance and love, hate and envy, dreams and pain, to touch what is true not only for themselves but for humanity in general. It's this achievement, especially the fears and challenges of adolescence and the betrayal within families, that allows some authors, like V.C. Andrews, to become international successes. At the time of this writing, there is a V.C. Andrews title in just about every country that has a publisher, including, as of relatively recently, mainland China. What is it about this author, her characters, and her stories that touches the hearts and minds of people regardless of their nationality, language, and socioeconomic development? What makes her universal? And especially, what makes Flowers in the Attic and all its sequels so popular in all these countries, a popularity that truly seems immortal? Ugh. That's how the entire biography is constructed. Questions. And then Neiderman half answers the question, but not quite. And the questions are repeated. The information overlaps. And when he finally gets to the part where he should develop it, he doesn't. A good example of this is V.C. Andrews' fall down the staircase. Or was it a fall down the staircase? We don't know for sure. But he mentions this fall in the introduction in just about every single chapter. And then when we finally get to the fall, I still don't know what happened. It's beyond irritating, not just beyond the attic. Part of the problem is Neiderman relies on about 3 sources for all his information. V.C. Andrews' relatives, and a People magazine article that Andrews despised so much that she refused to do much of any press after that, and a Faces of Fear article that Neiderman praises over and over again. The source material is integrated into the text like that of a college essay from a student who isn't all that good at integrating source material into a paper. This is nothing like The Trial of Lizzie Borden or Chaos or Wild Ones, all those other book-smart books that have made me smarter. This book, well, it showed me what not to do as a writer. Number 1 thing not to do, ask so many questions. Back to back and over again and from start to finish. It's terminally obnoxious. What's even worse is that none of these questions ever really get answered. I understand that Andrews, like some of the mystery surrounding her life, that she herself wasn't a reliable source. Neither was Marilyn Monroe. She spun so many tales that there is still confusion about her childhood and relationships. But there are multiple sources, so much so that I, as the reader, can draw my own conclusions. This book is so skimpy on source material that I'm just left throwing up my hands and saying, I don't care enough to draw my own conclusions. Which leads me to number 2. If you're going to write a biography, research the person in depth. That doesn't mean the book needs to be 800 pages long, but if you're relying on just a couple of articles and family memories, is that enough? When I taught college composition and we started the research paper, a variety of reliable sources was one of those topics we spent time discussing. If all your sources are saying the same thing, you have not chosen a challenging enough topic. If most of your paper comes from just a couple of sources, you haven't been thorough enough in your research. Your reader could just read the other 2 sources and will never need to read your paper. I wish I had just read the other 2 articles that Niederman continues to mention in the book. It would have saved me time and money. Number 3, organize your research paper in a coherent fashion that will make sense to your readers. Don't bring up topics until you are going to fully develop them. Jumping back and forth only aggravates your reader. It doesn't leave them in suspense, and even if it does, you better deliver the payout of that suspense. This book does not deliver anything at all. Number 4, fully develop your ideas. If you can't fully develop the idea, then you haven't researched the material enough. And finally, number 5, if this isn't a research paper but a biography, then it shouldn't sound like a research paper. I don't know if I learned much of anything about V.C. Andrews. I was so annoyed with the writing and organization of the book that Andrews got lost in my aggravation. I liked the documents that the book had in it. I liked the Flowers in the Attic proposal, but I didn't gain a sense of much of anything else. Niederman doesn't delve into Andrews' odd, sometimes creepy portrayal of father-daughter relationships. He doesn't fully develop the whatever happened to Baby Jane rumors of Andrews and her mother, although he does ask questions about it. Ultimately, we end up knowing very little. A quick internet search will give you what you need. Niederman does draw parallels with Andrews' life and her characters and plot lines. Andrews was praised for her beauty and her hair. We see those clearly in Flowers in the Attic. So you will get some tidbits, but it's not worth the atrocious, tedious process of reading this book. Niederman wrote all of V.C. Andrews' books after she died. The ones that are full of cliches and repeated plots and characters that I stopped reading while I was in high school because even as a high school student, I had tired of the repetitious plots and annoying cliches. Yet nonfiction writing does not seem to be his genre. The second half of the book is Andrews' unfinished novel called The Obsessed. If you've read V.C. Andrews already, you don't need to read these 80 pages because it focuses on that creepy father-daughter relationship. Andrews grew up in the 1930s. She's one of my grandparents' time. Her books appear to take place more in the 50s. I'm not going to read an excerpt because all her books seem to replicate the same sort of older male family member having untoward thoughts about a teenage relation. That would have been a good topic for Niederman to develop and assess within Andrews' books. We write what we know, so all fiction has shreds of truth somewhere within it. Niederman never asked such questions, although he asked about 10,000 other questions in the book. My frustration with The Woman Beyond the Attic is somewhat misdirected, though. I've read hundreds of books in my lifetime, and what I can't seem to get past with books I've read in the past 5 years or so is how some of these books get published. It's not the authors themselves I have issue with. Niederman has written hundreds of books. He's established and already has quite the audience. So does Stephen King, Daniel Steele, James Patterson, and such prolific writers will have a few stinkers mixed in there, here and there. King has admitted to it. The book I'm currently reading is this one, Fast Girl, A Life Spent Running from Madness by Susie Favor Hamilton with Sarah Tomlinson, and it was published in 2015. Hamilton was the Olympic runner who turned into a Las Vegas escort. It's number 3 on my most poorly written book list. Sharon Stone's memoir is still number 2. And I'm just at the halfway point. Hamilton uses the word actually twice in the same sentence. She uses very about 10 times on every page. She rambles, has oddly placed dialogue that just repeats what she has already summarized, writes like a high school girl would talk, and worse, admits that she hates reading and never does so. Trust me, the book shows it. She got published because of her scandal and who she was. That's not the problem I have with all of this either. The Woman Beyond the Attic was published by Gallery Books, a division of Simon & Schuster. Fast Girl was published by Day Street, an imprint of William Morrow Publishers, who is part of HarperCollins. Simon & Schuster and HarperCollins are big book publishers. What I'm questioning is the editing process. These were not self-published books. These books went through the whole publishing process, which means they had an editor overseeing the book. How did these two books make it through and publish and through an editor in the condition that they did? So while I know I'm getting way off topic with this, since this has little to do with VC Andrews anymore, are we not editing books anymore? I'm seeing more and more self-published books at Barnes & Noble, or at least the kinds of books that are published through many smaller places that aren't going through that normal process. But the covers of the books have a different feel to them and the pages are different. Even Scott Ryan's 30-something at 30 had this look and feel to it. The introduction and epilogue formatting drove me nuts as it looked like something formatted on Word with double spaces between paragraphs while the paragraphs themselves were single-spaced. But that was okay for such a book. He wasn't part of a big publishing house. I'm willing to give more leeway to a self-published author nowadays. These are people who have done what so many people say they could do but don't. They've written a book. And without name or connections, it will be difficult to get published. Not impossible, but improbable. I'm willing to let some typos and some obvious problems with narrative structure slide if it's a one-man show sort of thing. But books like The Woman Beyond the Attic, I would love to contact the editor, who Adam Wilson is listed in the acknowledgments, but for the VC Andrews novels, not necessarily this book, and ask that editor what they thought of this book. Did you find the questions obnoxious? And Niederman may have some great fiction out there. In his bio on the book, it says he wrote The Devil's Advocate, which was turned into a movie starring Keanu Reeves. But how did this book, with this juvenile academic writing, get past the editing process in this condition? Sarah Tomlinson is a known ghostwriter, apparently for 2 New York Times bestsellers, which are uncredited. At least that's what it says on her website that doesn't appear to have been updated since 2015. So if Sarah Tomlinson is primarily responsible for writing the mess that is Fast Girl, how? I'm just so confused. These are basic rules of writing. Don't use very or actually, much less twice in the same sentence. Did these books not go through a real editor even though a huge prominent publishing house published the book? I know I'm harping on an issue right now. I'm not finished with Fast Girl, but I already know I won't do a Booksmart episode on it because I hate doing episodes for books that are written questionably. I even debated about wasting my energy on the episode for The Woman Beyond the Attic, yet it baffled me so much that I felt I needed to share it. But maybe it's me. Maybe I'm too critical or look too much at the process and style more so than the content or the story. Maybe because I spend so much of my free time writing, I'm always assessing whatever I'm reading for the quality of the writing and how the story comes together. Maybe it's because I'm a teacher and I circle the likes and the actuallys and the veries on my students' papers, encouraging them to avoid such words when they write. Such words add nothing to what you're writing and only aggravate your reader. And use questions sparingly. I'm not sure I'll ever use a question in my writing again after reading this book. Ultimately, I'm just baffled at how some books get through the tediously slow publishing process and what editors are actually doing nowadays. Yes, I use the word actually. Imagine if I kept using it in every sentence and how obnoxious that would be. Editors are supposed to clean up an author's writing. They kill darlings and adverbs and fix split infinitives. They should have crossed out every single one of Niederman's questions and scrapped the entire introduction. They should have told him not to subtitle it The VC Andrews Story. They should have told him to not jump around with information. They should have told him to research more. I just can't believe a publishing house okayed this book when it was written in this way. What I learned most from this experience? Read a couple of pages word for word before I decide to buy a book. Not just flip through it and skim it on a couple of pages, but assess the writing word for word before I spend my money on it. I guess I did learn some things after all. That's all for this episode of Booksmart. As always, I try to get a little bit smarter, one book at a time.